Welcome to the Dr. America Show here on the WEAC Radio Network. I am your host, Dr. Sanjeev Sriram. Thanks so much for joining us today. So, as some of you may have noticed, I am wearing orange today. This is in recognition of National Gun Violence Awareness Day. It is the first time that the group Everytown Against Gun Violence has sponsored a national day to recognize and remember the problem of gun violence in our country. And I'm really proud to be wearing the orange because it's a really important public health issue. I know that we've covered it on this show before, but there's a little bit of a story behind the wearing orange that is going on today, June 2nd. So, to kind of give some background on our very first National Gun Violence Awareness Day, I'd like to, take us back to, actually this goes, my story is actually with this is going to go back to 2012. December 15th, 2012 was the day of the Sandy Hook shooting. It was also, soon after that, we had groups like, Everytown USA, we had Moms Demand Action Against Gun Violence get together, and these were everyday people wanting to see some real solutions for the problem of gun violence. And the Sandy Hook shooting was a wake-up call to many Americans who cared about this issue and who started to care about this issue. And and I was heartbroken, just to see that we lived in a country where this could happen at elementary school. That kids who were just going to school that day in Newtown, Connecticut, were faced with just such just horrific crime, that could have been totally prevented if we had just done a smarter job with, banning assault weapons, doing proper background checks, and just really having an honest conversation about whether in America we just simply have too many guns. I was, at the time I was very hopeful that, we were going to have the really serious conversations, that we were going to finally see something done about, gun safety laws in this country. And, I was keeping my fingers crossed, and then it was looking more and more like maybe this wasn't going to happen. And, and then fast forward to January, and it was Inauguration Day. And, Inauguration Day, I was there at the President's parade, watching the schools, with marching bands and dancers and people go by. And, for once it was one of those days where you wanted to just sort of celebrate all of these people, celebrating our, the president's reelection. And it was, it was just it was a good occasion. And, that particular day, a young woman, Hadia Pendleton, she was 16 going on 17 at the time. She got to perform at the inauguration festivities. She was part of the parade. Now, I'm not going to claim that I saw Hadia, and and to be truthful, I can't remember her specific high school's performance in the inauguration parade, but I do remember thinking that like when I connected it back to those children who had died at Sandy Hook, I was just thinking like, wow, at least these kids are going to be able to, savor this moment. This is something that they're going to remember for the rest of their lives, getting to perform at the first African-American president's, re-election success, that inauguration day. What a story. She's, one of the, and I felt that, this is one of those teenagers, all these teenagers are old enough to, to carry this memory with them, because, who wouldn't remember getting to perform on Inauguration Day for the first black president? And I remember thinking about that and, wishing that the Sandy Hook kids would, be able to, have similar memories, but unfortunately they couldn't because of their lives being cut short by the horrific gun violence. And sure enough, about a week later, Hadia Pendleton is walking home from school. She has nothing to do with anything related to gun violence except that she was a victim when she was struck and killed by a bullet from another conflict that had escalated and involve guns unnecessarily, because that's just the way this country seems to resolve its conflicts lately, is by, having things escalate to the point of gun violence. And, it's just so tragic that, this young woman got to have like probably one of the highlights of her teenage life, getting to perform on Inauguration Day, and then to see that, just, tragically gone, because of gun violence. And today is June 2nd. If Hadia Pendleton had been alive today, she would be 18 years old. And her friends and family have asked people through various groups like Everytown USA and Moms Demand Action to wear orange as a way to honor Hadia's life and to remind our fellow Americans about the importance of gun violence as a national issue. And I want to talk about it today as a public health issue. I think that it's a tragic opportunity, but it's an important one to remember that, National Gun Violence Awareness Day, should be something that we shouldn't have to recognize. Like, this is not something that we should have to, spend time thinking about. But it is, because we seem to have been struck by an inertia in this country to get serious and get real at the federal level about doing something about stopping gun violence. For people who feel that, maybe this is, not all that serious of an issue, let's run through some of these statistics, because I think it's actually pretty important to, understand just how serious this issue is. In the United States, you are more than 20 times more likely to lose your life from a gun than you are in any other first world nation. Now, that is just like by virtue of being an American. That's before we get into the breakdowns of like how old you are, what your race is, what your gender is, like where you live, like before we even get into any of that, just by virtue of being in the United States, you are more than 20 times more likely to die from a gun than you are in any other first world nation on earth. So, that's something to think about. And then when you do start to break it down according to, gender, you find that, in the United States, women are 11 times more likely, American women are 11 times more likely to be shot and killed than women in other developed countries. And it's really because we have this problem of, we have a high rate of domestic violence deaths that, those are resulting in death because of, really weak system of gun laws and a preponderance of guns. If we were to, get serious about enacting smarter gun laws, reducing the number of guns in this country, then maybe we can start tackling this serious cause of death for American women. And, there is like a little point of light that the Obama administration is really trying very hard to work on federal regulations to keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers. So, there is, some work being done, but even with that kind of, effort, there are, people who are afraid to support such a common sense measure, such as stopping domestic abusers from having, possession of guns. In fact, when you look at, how, dangerous these, statistics are for women and gun violence, it's shocking to actually see how little is being done at the state level, because you would think that, maybe, federally it's tougher to, break through things like filibusters and, to have like a majority of Congress on your side. But, even across this country, 41 states do not require domestic abusers to relinquish guns that they already own. These are people who already have a proven track record of domestic abuse, and only 9 states in the country tell these domestic abusers that you're not allowed to have weapons anymore, that or even to like tell them that you cannot even temporarily have weapons anymore. Like, it is a serious issue that can be fixed at the federal and state house levels, but only if we actually take this day of awareness and turn it into some action. So, on top of talking about what a threat, guns are to women, it's important to actually kind of also recognize like just how dangerous they are for young people. Because you remember how I was saying that you're 20 times more likely to die from a gun if you're just by virtue of being an American. But that risk actually goes up by a lot if you are 20 years old or younger. And after car accidents is still number one. Gun violence is the second leading cause of death for people under the age of 20 in this country. And when you look at, and actually I really appreciate Everytown USA doing this report about school shootings, because it's shocking to think that since the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, there have been 94 school shootings in 33 states across the country. Half of those, about half of those, 49 of those shootings happen in K to 12 level schools. That is like kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school. The other 45 happened at the college or university level. Now, what I appreciate about the Everytown, their study of these school shootings is that they were actually looked at a whole lot of different kinds of shootings. They looked at shootings where, a gun was in the possession of, somebody, either a student, faculty member, visitor to the school, and the gun accidentally went off. They then looked at, okay, was it fired intentionally, unintentionally? They looked at, was someone hurt? Was someone killed? Did the shooter, attempt suicide, complete suicide? They went through a lot of grisly details. But, even if you don't necessarily consider every little detail of every little, shooting, I think that it's shocking that, in this country, we're having about one school shooting a week. And these are shootings that are happening at school. These are places where we would want, people to, whether it's kids, whether it's kindergartners, like those Sandy Hook kindergartners, whether it's elementary school kids, high school kids, college students, we'd want them to be able to get their education without wondering whether they're going to get shot. That is one of the most basic tenets of safety that we would want for, for our kids when they're going to school. Now, despite this extensive report, which has been available to anybody who cares, for about a year now, despite all of this information being available, our good friends over in Texas decided to pass a bill called the Campus Carry Bill. This is, heading to the governor's desk, and it's looking like he's more than likely going to sign it. And this happened in Texas, mind you, after that crazy Waco shooting where, you had biker gangs who seemed to be arguing over a parking space. I kid you not. They were arguing over a parking space. Things got way out of hand. People are shooting at each other. Despite that happening in their state borders, the Texas state legislatures decides that now is not only the time to, talk about, let's let students take guns to college, but let's actually protect them, and call this a quote unquote right, that they have a right to take guns to college. And so, now there is it's expected that Governor Abbott is going to sign this into law, that he is going to sign a campus carry bill into law that would basically say that the state's public universities must allow handguns in dorms, classrooms, and campus buildings statewide. And it's almost like the exact opposite step that you would want any kind of lawmaker to take after learning that there has been about one school shooting every week since Newtown. It's the exact opposite direction. And the other thing that's actually kind of embarrassing about, what's going on in Texas with this campus carry bill is that, Texas state legislature only convenes every other year. Never mind the fact that they're third most populous state in the country. They decide to convene their legislature, every other year. They decide to prioritize this. They are not prioritizing expansion of Medicaid. So you could conceivably end up in a situation where you could get shot because they decided that, some students' right to a gun was more important than their classmates' right to getting health care. And I mean, they have done nothing about protecting people after they've been shot. Shooting is apparently a more important right to the Texas state legislature than like helping a victim who may be shot now by their student who is just having a bad day or can't handle the stress of midterms or finals week. So. Texas, but before you were expanding gun rights, I think, it would have really helped if you had thought about expanding health rights. I think that, when you really look at this list of priorities, I mean, it's just shocking to me. And I think that you've really forfeited any kind of right to ever talk about, how heartbroken you might feel for the kids in Newtown, Connecticut, how heartbroken you might feel for Hadia Pendleton, when this is your, legislature's priority to make sure that every college student can bring a gun to their dorm or their campus cafeteria or their classroom. I mean, it's just really, really, shockingly disappointing that this is what the Texas state legislature is working on. But the thing is that I do want to give you guys some news that you can use, because obviously we've got state legislatures that are kind of all over the place. Like, we've got Washington State that made, background checks pretty much universal. And that was really because, the voters and the everyday people of Washington State, got together during this last election cycle and, pushed through a ballot initiative to make background checks universal in their state. I would say that, the prescription for gun violence, if you want to call it that, I would say that we need to follow that model, that we need to, really get our citizens involved, because, when they survey people about background checks, it gets like 92% of Americans support. It gets even among like the membership of the NRA. This is different than the NRA lobbyists and the people who are being paid by the gun industry to do their dirty work on Congress. I'm talking about like your everyday guy who has like an NRA membership card in his wallet. Those kinds of folks are saying that they support background checks. Over 70% of them have support for background checks. So to me, my prescription is that continue that kind of like support for getting background checks on ballot initiatives. Put it in your, state legislature agenda. We can make it happen. If you check out Everytown USA's, everytown.org's, website, and you look at like how much they've accomplished since the Newtown shooting, I know that I've covered some bad news, but they've got a lot of good news to cover here. There are a lot of state legislatures that are finally paying attention to background checks, and they'll continue to do so if we, the people, speak up for it. So definitely put some people power into, getting background checks passed. The other thing that I would prescribe, and it's something that we've talked about on this show before, is the Ask campaign. We're entering the summer. This is a time of year where, our children are being taken care of by other relatives while, school is out. They're being taken care of by, friends of the family. And it helps to ask that simple question of, hey, do you have a gun in your home, or like wherever, your child is about to spend time? Is there a gun there? If so, how is it stored? Are they, storing it? Basically what you want to make sure of is that the gun is locked, that the ammo and the gun are stored separately, and of course that the gun is stored unloaded. People seriously underestimate children's curiosity, children's knowledge of like where guns are hidden or stored. And the Ask campaign has saved thousands of children's lives. It's something that you don't have to wait for a state legislature or your member of Congress to make happen. This is the kind of care that we can do for each other. In terms of actually making, gun violence a thing of the past. So, when it comes to National Gun Violence Awareness Day, I think that, we need to not only wear the orange and raise awareness, but we need to raise some action. And I think that, putting people power behind background checks, doing the Ask campaign to, save our kids' lives is going to make a huge difference for reducing the amount of gun violence that we unnecessarily suffer from as Americans, and uniquely as Americans, even in the world. So I want to thank you guys for hanging in there with me on this this National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And when we come back, I'm going to be talking about the next segment of our program, and that is about actually, you know what? I'm going to I'm going to wait for you guys to come back before I tell you what the next segment is about. But anyway, thank you for hearing about National Gun Violence Awareness Day. You've been listening to the Dr. America Show here on the We Act Radio Network. I'm your host, Dr. Sanjeev Sriram, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Dr. America Show. I am your host, Dr. Sanjeev Sriram, and here we are on the We Act Radio Network. Thanks for coming back. So this next segment of the program, you guys may have noticed that the title of the show this week is Dr. America versus Guns, Gays, and God. So I wanted to, I covered the first segment of the program on National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And for this next part of the program, I wanted to bring special attention to a really important piece of legislation that just got proposed last month by Congressman Ted Lieu. And this is a national ban on LGBT conversion therapy. It was introduced in the House of Representatives last month. And the reason why I feel like conversion therapy needs to be talked about is because when you look at, for those of you who don't know what conversion therapy is, it's basically, it comes from this very false premise that a person can choose their their sexuality, and that you can, quote unquote, pray the gay away. And by actually using a whole lot of harmful techniques, psychological techniques, you can quote unquote make a person straight, which has been disproven and time and time again by many scientific and medical communities. But we're still seeing a whole lot of young people across the country be subjected to these very dangerous therapies, conversion therapies, and it's important that we get a handle on it nationally, that that these are not rooted in science, that these are not therapists, and that this is basically bigotry, pumping junk science on people. And I'm really proud of Congressman Ted Lieu for introducing this bill. It's the first time that the Congress has ever dealt with a ban on conversion therapy, and it's actually pretty significant because when you look, nationwide at what state legislatures have tried to do about stopping these bigots who from for taking on the title of therapists and inflicting harm on our LGBT brothers and sisters. What you find when you look at the state legislatures is that pretty much only California, the District of Columbia, and New Jersey have actually passed laws banning conversion therapy. And what's really unfortunate about this is that we don't really tolerate this kind of cruelty in other forms of medical practice. This is it's not something that is recognized as therapy in any major medical organization. there have been some legal challenges to these laws, and a lot of district courts have sided with doctors, real therapists, and scientists with that conversion therapy is more damaging than it is helpful. That the viewpoint that they have about sexual orientation, sexuality, and choice of behavior are really just fundamentally outdated. And so, if you're in a state where they are looking at this ban, or if you are interested in looking at, Ted Lieu's proposed bill, it's good to, ask your member of Congress, do they stand with, doctors or not? Because when you look at the number of medical organizations that have come out against, against conversion therapy, I mean, it's pretty much every doctor you can think of. It's the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics. And, and those are kind of like the big four. And then you actually have, people who are real therapists, the American Association for, Marriage and Family Therapy, the American Counseling Association, the National Association of Social Workers. All of these groups have condemned conversion therapy. And it's high time that, our government pass, Congressman Ted Lieu's bill and make this a nationwide ban, because we simply can't wait for, states to do the right thing when there's this, when there is this bigotry in a white coat out there that is actually threatening the lives of our young people. And I specifically want to point out that this is a major health threat. Conversion therapy is a major health threat to our LGBT brothers and sisters out there, simply because as teenagers, they face a pretty high risk for, wanting to feel accepted, wanting to, feel normal. And, conversion therapy is telling them all the rest of it, is telling them pretty much that they are never going to be accepted, that they are not normal, that that who they are and who they love is not okay. And it has devastating consequences. There have been, kids who have, gone through conversion therapy, and out of the guilt and shame that they have felt, it has, plunged them into depression. There are numerous stories and cases of young people who have taken their life and have committed suicide because of, the pain inflicted by conversion therapy. And it's high time that we just recognize that, homosexuality is not an addiction. It's not, something that you can pray it away. And I think that this particular bill is going to be a major stepping stone for for LGBT health in this country. So, for a lot of people, the national ban on conversion therapy, it might look like it's a consumer protection issue, which it is, but to me, the priority is really that we protect the mental health and well-being of our LGBT brothers and sisters, and finally recognize that, the only reason why, an LGBT person should be going to a therapist is to actually feel better about their choices, to feel better about their mental health and, about their self-esteem, not to go and feel worse. And I really want to commend, Congressman Ted Lieu and the other members of Congress who have co-signed this particular piece of legislation. And I hope that, it keeps getting introduced in Congress until it is passed and that it is enforced. So I want to thank you guys for, this segment about conversion therapy. There's a lot to learn, a lot to, protect LGBT, youngsters. And I hope that, you guys take a minute to learn more, send your thanks to Congressman Ted Lieu, and put some pressure on your members of Congress to get behind this bill. It's not, conversion therapy is not medicine, it is not science, and it has no place in, our offices of therapists. Thanks again for for tuning in to Dr. America on the We Act Radio Network. I am your host, Dr. Sanjeev Sriram, and we'll be right back in just a minute.
to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Dr. America Show here on the We Act Radio Network. I'm your host, Dr. Sanjeev Sriram, and thanks for coming back for this last segment of the program. We've been covering, guns, gays, and God, and we've covered the National Gun Violence Awareness Day. We've covered some problems that are going on with conversion therapy and some efforts in Congress and other state houses to stop it. And for this last segment of the program, I know that it might sound like I'm, about to be one of those godless liberals who's about to go off on, on God and church and Christianity. But actually, I want to throw you guys for a little bit of a loop and tell you this really uplifting story about a bishop in North Carolina who I think is actually a powerful role model for members of Congress and for his very own state legislature. So let me tell you about this guy. This is Bishop George B. Jackson. He is a pastor of the Citadel of Faith Christian Fellowship of Thomasville, North Carolina. And our good bishop is actually taking on an incredible journey. He is going to walk all the way from Belhaven, North Carolina, to Washington, D.C. That's about a 273-mile walk, and he's being joined by 20 other walkers, and what their mission is that they are wanting to draw some attention to the closings of rural hospitals in southern states like North Carolina that have rejected Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act. So, and he's actually, he's given a couple of interviews, and he's still on the road walking, and it's so compelling to hear him describe exactly what the problems are, because in his town of Belhaven, North Carolina, it's 62% African American. The closest emergency room, now that the nearby local hospital had to close for budget reasons, the closest emergency room for the people of Belhaven, North Carolina, is 45 minutes away. And Bishop Jackson understands totally that that 45-minute ambulance ride, if you're in the middle of a heart attack, that is life and death right there. And it's for no other reason than because their local hospital had to shut down because they could not afford to keep the lights on, to keep the all the people employed, and take care of the community. And this was not inevitable. It didn't need to happen. This happened because North Carolina has been making the very ill-advised, very short-sighted decision to not expand Medicaid, which would have actually brought the state some federal funding, helped keep some of these rural hospitals open, and would have helped his community. And so to raise awareness and draw attention to this problem, Bishop Jackson is going to walk 273 miles. And if this story sounds familiar, there was another mayor from North Carolina who did the same thing. And I think the idea is that they're going to keep doing these kinds of marches and walks until things change, because they simply cannot accept that their communities are going to just be these political footballs that our members of Congress and the members of state legislatures are going to toy with until 2016 or whenever the next election cycle, or whenever it becomes convenient for politicians to answer the very real basic health needs of these communities. And I mean, I am really proud of, Bishop Jackson, using the platform of the church, which has been, a really powerful source of social change and progress in America that I don't think gets enough credit. I feel that, when a lot of, pastors, bishops, rabbis, imams, show up at organizing events and are, invited to give speeches, it's unfortunate that they don't really get the attendance that, that they deserve, because a lot of other liberals simply feel that they have a stereotype about religion not having, done tremendous value in this country, when in fact, I feel that, if it wasn't for, people like, this bishop, people, in the American faith, community, there are a lot of people who would not have health insurance right now. There are a lot of people who would be, further struggling than they already are. And oftentimes the church has been a very, and not just the church, I mean, I'm talking like synagogues, mosques, temples. These faith institutions have been such powerful places of organizing, of making real change happen. And I guess like where I maybe feel the kinship as a physician is that, I feel that people go to church for help that they need right now. And, that there are ideologies and dogmas and things that are about, the bigger picture and about, the slowness of progress and things like that. They go in understanding that, but they need help in the now. And I feel that, people of the faith community, like faith leaders, really do understand that urgency of now. And I do, and I want to support Bishop Jackson for, keeping up that urgency. And so he does have a GoFundMe webpage, and his goal is to raise $3,000. And it looks like as of the beginning of this week, June 1st, he was almost halfway there. And I guess if there are any funds that remain after this march is done, or if they exceed that, they're going to pretty much take whatever money they don't use to, keep themselves alive, basically. They're going to take whatever money they don't use and use that towards helping people with healthcare bills that are running out of control. And so it's a pretty noble cause. I think that, I think that this is something that I hope that the people of North Carolina don't have to keep marching to D.C. I feel that my hope is that this is like the last of the marches and walks that have to happen, because we can do better than this. I feel that living in North Carolina, or if you're Louis Lang living in South Carolina, or if you're any of the people in Texas right now who are struggling with the flooding in Houston, I mean, I don't feel like your state should be it shouldn't be a black mark on your health. It shouldn't be the kind of thing where you live all of a sudden dictates what your health outcomes are going to be. And I think, the faith community really gets it. And so I commend them for doing this important advocacy. And I also want to thank another North Carolina member of the faith community, and you probably have heard of Reverend William Barber. And it actually turns out that Bishop Jackson and Reverend Barber are actually close colleagues in advocacy, and they are birds of a feather. They belong to the same flock. Reverend Barber is the leader of the Moral Mondays movement, which hopefully you've heard of by now. He is also the president of North Carolina's NAACP chapter. And, earlier this year, he actually did kind of, make the connections between, about politics, faith, and healthcare in a letter that he sent to state lawmakers earlier this year in North Carolina. And I'm going to go ahead and quote his letter here. He says, Governor Pat McCrory and his allies in the North Carolina Senate and House are returning to Raleigh to continue their unrelenting war on the poor. The governor and legislatures of North Carolina need to be reminded of the requirements of the Constitution they swore to uphold, drawn from Judeo-Christian values expressed in the Bible they hold when they are sworn into office. One particular scripture makes it clear that although they profess to believe in God and his sacred scriptures, their hearts and actions are far from him. And then he quotes Isaiah 10, and he says, quote, "Doom to you who legislate evil, who make laws that make victims, laws that make misery for the poor, that rob my destitute people of dignity." End quote. Yeah, I mean, and that, it's like, that's like one of those powerful statements that just sort of gives you that moment of pause where, you realize that I feel that when we partner with and we ally ourselves with the faith community to achieve, social change, whether that's in health justice or any of the issues that we've been talking on today's show with gun safety or LGBT rights, and I think that we actually find ourselves in a very powerful position to claim some moral authority and force some change. So good luck to Bishop Jackson, and I look forward to hopefully meeting you in D.C. when you get here next week, and we'll try to have you on the show if we can. But if not, I mean, thank you for what you're doing. Really appreciate it. And to the people in Washington and to the state legislatures around the country, I feel that I think that Bishop Jackson is your role model. I think that he is putting his efforts where his mouth has been, and he is raising awareness on an issue that is completely and totally avoidable. By the time Bishop Jackson gets here, we're going to be that much closer to the Supreme Court ruling on King versus Burwell. We've covered that Supreme Court case a lot on this program, but just to give you guys a refresher, this is the Supreme Court case where they have to decide whether the subsidies that people receive in a federal exchange that, and under the Affordable Care Act, if a person is buying health insurance in a federal exchange and they receive a subsidy for it, is that constitutional? Or is it that, when the Affordable Care Act was written, was it really that they were only going to get the subsidy if their home state built an exchange? I personally find it ridiculous that this Supreme Court case even made it this far, but if the Supreme Court decides to rule in favor of King, basically what that means is that you're going to see a whole lot of these subsidies that are helping over 6 million people afford health insurance. You're going to see those subsidies dry up. These 6 million are going to be left without insurance. The consequences for the rest of us are devastating because, as we've talked about on this show, insurance depends on all of us being in all together, regardless of whether that is, socialized medicine through a social insurance program, whether that's private insurance. When everybody is pitching in, it helps, keep the rest of us, all of us, financially secure when any of us get sick. So if the Supreme Court decides that these 6 million people are no longer going to receive their federal subsidies, then you're going to see a shockwave throughout the rest of the insurance, industry, where everybody's premiums can go up, everybody's, policies can rapidly change, and you might find yourself in a really financially precarious situation where you didn't have to be. Now, the thing that's really particularly tragic about this, and I'm not sure whether I'm saddened or disgusted or a little bit of both, but this is completely avoidable. The law can actually be clarified in a single paragraph, in just a couple of sentences. Congress can add some clarity about what their exact plan is for these federal subsidies in the Affordable Care Act. They can pass this law. It's less than a page long. It clarifies that, when we said that we wanted a federal exchange to be built in states that were not going to build their own health insurance exchange, we still mean for federal subsidies to make it to these people when they want to buy health insurance. Simple clarification that, that can be written by Congress, signed into law, and we can just put all of our minds at ease. This is the simple fix. This is how, ridiculously simple it is to fix a problem that is at the center of King versus Burwell. Why has this not happened? And I can tell you that the reason why this has not happened is because you have you have the opposition to the Affordable Care Act, which seems to be like split into a whole lot of different camps. But what they all seem to agree upon is let's, really just make our opponents suffer. They want to see that, that President Obama, that Democrats, that anybody who voted for and supported the Affordable Care Act suffers politically, and they want to try to reap score the points, reap the benefits as this disaster is unfolding over on 6 million Americans. And when you challenge them on this, there are Republicans in the Senate and the House who try to keep telling reporters that, that they've got an idea, that they've got like plans that are in the works. And to take them at their word, you would have to believe that these guys have got, some plans put together that will, either genuinely carry these 6 million people until they can come up with another policy to supposedly replace the Affordable Care Act, or that they're going to, come up with a plan that will completely replace the Affordable Care Act, and that there won't be any of this like temporary stuff, that they'll just like come up with something brand new, ready to go. And then I feel like there is the other side of the Republican Party that really doesn't want to do anything about this issue, because what they really want to just focus on is scoring those political points and going through all of the civics and policy writing of how do we make sure that people retain the insurance that they just bought. They really just are indifferent to that situation. They have forfeited their responsibility as policymakers, but they want to maximize their opportunity as political players. And in the meantime, they've got 6 million people who are just left in the lurch. The way I see it is that the King versus Burwell verdict, if it goes in favor of King, that is like the hurricane that you see off the coast that your satellite is telling you it could make landfall. Now, that verdict could make landfall and could be disastrous for these 6 million people, or that verdict could like rule in favor of Burwell, and in which case it's not really even much of a storm at all, and it just like blows out back to sea, and nobody is really affected. The thing is that like, in this analogy with with hurricanes, we wouldn't just let 6 million people suffer. We wouldn't just let this like storm hit these folks without giving them any kind of support whatsoever. I mean, could you imagine if we like actually just knowingly put this many people at risk and, said that, yeah, we know the storm is coming, but we're not going to do anything. The last time we did this, by the way, we actually did suffer in Hurricane Katrina hit, New Orleans, and not nearly enough was done to, save lives that could have been saved. And and it just it breaks my heart that we could be looking at another situation where we know perfectly well what needs to be done to stop disaster striking 6 million people. But because we seem to prioritize, or not really we, but because the people that we have elected decide that prioritizing their political points is more important than preserving the health care of 6 million people, we're going to just stand by and do nothing and let the storm just fall. I bring this up mainly because I'm encouraged by our faith activists. I'm encouraged by the progressives that I see out there who are really scrambling to figure out what are they going to do for people in the event that they are hit with with the worst possible verdict. And they're really trying to troubleshoot. They have been, talking to their governors. They've been talking to state legislatures. They have really been trying to figure out contingency plans in order to help the, 6 million people. But at the end of the day, you keep coming back to that number, 6 million people. And it's an entire industry of the health insurance industry, which will be so badly shaken that it isn't just those 6 million of the first ones will be feeling it, but then the shockwaves end up affecting more and more and more of us. And I'm encouraged that we do have activism that is going to try and do their best, but it infuriates me that, this problem would not necessarily even be a problem if we had the kind of Congress that would put patience before politics, patch this thing up, write into law the clarification that really is, to me, a redundancy. And, let's go about addressing the next challenges that we need to address in the American healthcare system. To me, I feel like we're putting ourselves through an unnecessary catastrophe by, just doing nothing to protect, the people who have nothing to gain in, Congress's political points. There's really nothing to be gained by, so many southern states that are, benefiting from the federal exchanges. There is nothing for them to gain, from, these politicians playing their games. And I really encourage you, if you care about this issue, to learn more. Write your members of Congress, write your governors, write your state legislatures, and let's fix this. Let's get past, some of this pettiness. Let's get past these cynical, sicknesses that we have when it comes to people's lives, and let's actually make, health justice real. I really do wish Bishop Jackson and all of the activists with Moral Mondays the very best. I'm looking forward to, meeting up with you guys when you arrive in D.C. And hopefully, my fury and frustration is all for nothing, and the Supreme Court will rule in favor of Burwell. But the fact that we even have to have this conversation, I hope, should be motivation that we need to do better as a country with who we put into office with these kinds of responsibilities. Okay, when we come back, I'm going to cover a couple of other news items that have been going on in the world of health and public health and politics. And so, definitely come back. You've been listening to the Dr. America Show on the We Act Radio Network. I'm your host, Dr. Sanjeev Sriram, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Dr. America Show here on the We Act Radio Network. I'm your host, Dr. Sanjeev Sriram. And, for this last bit of the program, I just wanted to bring your attention to our good friend, Governor Scott Walker over in Wisconsin. Last week, I told you guys about a dumb thing he said when it came to women wanting to, who were seeking an abortion, how he felt that it was okay to make them get an intrusive, mandatory vaginal ultrasound because, after all, ultrasounds are pretty cool. So our friend, Governor, decided to double down on dumb by actually saying that he was going to sign a measure banning abortion at 20 weeks without an exception for rape or incest. And he actually said that it's only really in the initial months that people are most concerned about access to care. Okay, Governor Walker, I think that, it's you're just putting the dumb on top of the dumb when it's you're going to, mandate that a woman get a, vaginal ultrasound. You're going to say that you make no exceptions for rape or incest. And then, on top of all of that, you're going to, triple down on dumb by saying that the father of the unborn child or the fetus can sue the woman for getting an abortion because of distress that he the father would feel by her making that choice. This is just it's just ridiculous on top of ridiculous, and the thing that I find so frustrating is that, I mean, it just feels like there's no concept of science in any of this. That, I mean, it even includes there's actually instructions to the doctor. This is the other part that I find like so aggravating about this, is that there are instructions to the bill instructs physicians to, quote, terminate the pregnancy in the manner that provides the best opportunity for the unborn child to survive. And that's somehow going to happen at around 20 weeks. It's like, scientifically and medically speaking, that is like near impossible to do. And you are putting everybody in this awful situation where, I mean, everybody is like, I mean, suffering. And it feels like if you actually just took some time to understand the science, if you took some time to understand what obstetricians and women, are, I mean, talking about and going through as decision makers together, you would see the stupidity and misguidedness of this bill. And Governor Walker, I mean, I know that you're planning on announcing, a run for, president at the end of this month. I can tell you that the majority of Americans really just want these decisions to be left between, women and doctors who, have the best understanding of the woman's situation, and for, for government to just sort of take, a step back out of the exam room and let conversations and decisions be made as they need to be made off of science and off of the patient's situation. I mean, this is, if you plan on bringing this kind of like irresponsibility to Washington, you're lucky you made it this far in Wisconsin. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys, because apparently this bill is already kind of like making it to, the governor's desk. We'll see how long it lasts in court. But anyway, I just thought I should bring that to your attention, because just when you thought that, Governor Scott Walker couldn't say something dumber than vaginal ultrasounds are cool, he triples down on it. Anyway, so, I want to thank you guys for joining us for today's program. This was Dr. America versus Guns, Gays, and God. I know that we covered some pretty wide-ranging topics here. We started out talking about National Gun Violence Awareness Day. I want to thank everybody at Everytown USA for all the incredible advocacy, for doing the research that is actually, being stymied by a whole lot of political processes, but keeping, the importance of gun violence on the agenda. I thank the people over at Everytown for gun safety and for Moms Demand Action for all of their advocacy on their very first National Gun Violence Awareness Day. Proud to wear the orange with you guys. And then, the next thing that we covered was about, conversion therapy for gay teenagers, and how Representative Ted Lieu has a bill that is going to put a national ban on that. So if make sure you contact your member of Congress, get them on board to co-sponsor that bill, vote for it, make it happen, because there is no reason why our brothers and sisters in the LGBT community should be suffering with really junk science that has never helped anyone but has hurt millions. And then finally, we covered, some folks in the faith community who are, raising attention to the importance of Medicaid expansion in rural communities, and are, doing their best to save lives and bring attention to people who are being forgotten in the political circus. So I want to thank Bishop Jackson for making that long walk, from North Carolina all the way to Washington, D.C. Hope to catch up with you when you get here, sir. And, stay safe while you're out there. And to everybody else, make sure you go visit Bishop Bishop Jackson's walking GoFundMe fundraiser, and donate and stay in touch with his issues, because I think that he's got a lot to teach Congress and his state legislature about how to take care of the least among us, and I appreciate him for doing that. All right, guys, so we're going to be coming to you guys next week for another great episode of Dr. America here on the We Act Radio Network. I've been your host, Dr. Sanjeev Sriram, and until next time, salud to your health.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
What if I told you 1 in 5 Americans infected with HIV don't even know they have it?
With early diagnosis and treatment, you can live a long and healthy life.
And you know what? People who take their medication regularly reduce the risk of transmission by 96%.
96%? That's pretty amazing.
June 27th is National HIV Testing Day.
To find an HIV testing center near you, visit greaterthan.org.
Together, we can be greater than AIDS.